confess that there is an ambivalence on my part when it comes to preaching subversion, because I'm aware that along with revolution of any kind comes destruction, as a matter of course. And when you have children, and you become very protective, you become defensive. I can't say that I would glory in the streets running blood, you know, anywhere. You tear down something that's ugly and repressive, and you create something that's even more ugly and repressive. It's just, but it doesn't mean that you have to stop. It's necessary to continue to explore and to attempt these things. I mean, that's a given of human existence. I mean, we just don't stop. We never stop.
I think the British have really written the best work on these films. In America, they don't tend to take them that seriously, unless it's Hitchcock. And if you look at Hitchcock, it's just interesting. For example, the Academy with Hitchcock, he was only nominated 3 times, once for Lifeboat, once for Psycho, and I think the other time for Rebecca, I'm not sure. But I don't think he's ever won. He never won an award. It's very interesting, very interesting. And now he's considered, it's the top of technique, the height of it, you know, the best. And I don't think they'll ever take it seriously.
I remember with The Brood trying to get distribution from some people like Universal, and they were just not, it was a low-budget horror film. They were not the slightest bit interested. And it wasn't long after that Halloween and Friday the 13th made them take a second look. It was a kind of an elitist question, really. They just thought these films were beneath them. They were major studios. They were not interested in being involved in those kind of films. At first, they had to learn to like them because of the money involved. You could make a film that was not very expensive and make a lot of money. And I think gradually their aesthetic sense has changed to the point where they can understand that some of those films can be quite good films. They have nothing to be ashamed of distributing those films.
I mean, Cronenberg is certainly a filmmaker of extreme integrity and seriousness. And filmmakers of integrity and seriousness are certainly having great trouble surviving in the present climate.
You often find the belief that an image can kill. I mean, literally. I mean, it's almost like scanners, you know. Thoughts can kill, images can kill.
Mary Brown, until recently head of the Toronto Censor Board. Brown operates a system based on community standards, canvassing opinion about what images and ideas are unacceptable to the community at large and enforcing those opinions. It is a strict moral system, resulting in the extensive banning and cutting of films and videos.
There are 2 sets of guidelines, of course, the guidelines for classification as appropriate for the specific age groups, and then the guidelines that hopefully reflect the community level of tolerance, so that it provides a jurisdiction to prohibit the exhibition of certain visual images.
They put themselves in the position of saying, we don't care what the context of the image is. The context is not important. It's only the image itself.
When we were trying to establish our guidelines, we really asked people, we don't want you to tell us what you want to see or not want to see, but what are you prepared to prevent your neighbor seeing? The attitude seems to be, I don't want to see it myself, or had been, but if someone else wants to see it, they should have the right. But right now, I think it's coming down to whatever you see and whatever you are affects me because you are my neighbor. So that there may be a percentage who want to see very violent films, sexually violent films, who may enjoy watching rape and sexual mutilation. But there's also a vast majority of people who are concerned about its impact on those people who do want to see it. And if it overflows and impacts on neighborhood safety, then I think the majority have the right to say no.
The concept of community standards, I think, is a fascistic concept, because it suggests that there is a will of the community which could be used to suppress minority opinion. It's a very anti-democratic concept, and to me this is very clear.
The way that this is set up, I think, is not only consistent with, but essential to a democratic system. The majority of people in this province and in this country want prior regulation on sexually violent material and on child pornography. And if the majority want it, they should have it.
I don't think anyone would accept that in the broad sense, but it seems to be accepted and not recognized when it's used in the smaller sense of pornography, or what is pornographic, what is not pornographic, that kind of thing. I think it's completely untenable. Of course, the other thing is, who finds out what community standards are? And is the community Ontario, Toronto, the city, Canada, the country? What is the community that we're dealing with?
I know a lot of our community feel that there is a definite correlation between the proliferation of sexually violent material and public attitudes, and public behavior patterns.
If you try to prove these things, these theories, and I think really all you have to do is look into your own responses and the responses of the people around you, and you realize that if violent imagery really did provoke violence, then everyone would be violent, because we are constantly bombarded by violent imagery of one kind or another. It just doesn't work. It's not that simple. It's very complex.
James Furman, head of the British Board of Film Classification. Since the Video Recordings Bill became law in 1985, Furman's department has been classifying videos as well as film. However, the board does censor, still cutting scenes for adults over 18 years of age, where it is thought they may, in the words of parliamentary law, deprave and corrupt.
It's how something is portrayed, not how and why it's portrayed, not what is portrayed. And what worries us is whether there's a disinhibition effect of repeated viewing of certain kinds of things. All men are raised with a moral inhibition against rape. We know that women are vulnerable, they can be misused, and most sensible families teach teenage boys to be responsible and to have consideration. But there are films that actually erode that by disregarding it, or actually preaching that you should disregard it.
I think that censors tend to do what, in fact, only psychotics do, which is to say that they confuse reality with illusion. So the very suggestion of let's say, sadomasochism in a film will somehow trigger off the masses of psychotics out there to do things that they would never have done unless they'd been exposed to this image.
I think we're still one of the strictest boards in Europe, there's no doubt about that, because we have such strict guidelines on things like violence to women or rape, and stricter than many countries. I mean, there are many countries in Europe that don't censor films for adults at all, over 16 or over 18. They say, well, let it rip, adults can select and choose for themselves, and we won't worry. I think, interestingly, the feminist movement has made many of us redefine our terms and our standards, because although the feminists in the late 60s and early 70s were about giving women the same freedom that men have, often in sexual areas as well, I think they realized that they were paying a price for that. In a sense, it was catering to men's taste and not to women's taste.
I think that horror films in general, because they are so primal and they deal with such primal issues, and particularly death and violence, and therefore also sexuality, they are automatically in the arena that has become the feminist arena. I mean, it's a natural genre, I think, for the discussion of those issues. And so I think rather it's fitting that a horror film should be attacked or defended by various feminist groups. It makes a lot of sense to me.
I think rape has gone up in the last 15 years. There's no clear cause and effect in these things. But there's no doubt there are things out there in the video shops that ought not to be there, which are genuine incitement or encouragement to behave in ways which society would find absolutely unacceptable. And these are films which don't examine what's going on in the psyche in the way that Cronenberg tries to do. They are simply films which turn you on to things which are horrendous and should never be encouraged in films or videos.